everybody, it's that time again. It's Tech Fridays, and I'm Christine, this is Frank, and we are here to answer your questions regarding your Trifive. So type in your question, and as we're waiting for your questions to come in, Frank is going to go over some radiators here.
So previously we have talked a little bit about radiators. Today we're going to show you some differences between the V8 radiator and the 6-cylinder radiator. I don't have a factory core support to show you, but this is more considering the brackets on the actual radiator. So here we have the typical V8 radiator. This is what was used in design for 55 through 57 Chevys. Has the upper neck in the middle, and then we've got the lower neck on the passenger side. And then we're going to look at the bracket on the side here. This is what's important. So when this radiator, what part number was this radiator? Because I was just looking.
Is it on the box?
So this radiator has its brackets offset here. I believe it is going to be, yeah, this is the V8 radiator. So this is probably going to be.
Okay, so is it a 337?
Yes, part number 337. This is the V8 high efficient radiator that will work in all three models. So you're going to notice the bracket is offset more towards the back of the radiator. So when this thing's fitted up into the inside, the bracket on the core support is going to match up to this bracket. Now, so the difference, this radiator here, we just happen to have this 6-cylinder position radiator for a 57 because I want to show you the difference in the water neck. Now, when they put the radiator out in the front of a 57 Chevy for the 6-cylinder engines, they move the neck from the center off to the side. So your air baffle that's up inside the hood, you've got a baffle that comes down next to the radiator to block the air. The whole inside front of the car is baffled around the radiator. So as the air comes through the grill, the air can't go around the outside of the radiator, go over the top of the radiator, or underneath the radiator. So they, for some reason, had moved this. They moved the water neck, filler neck, off to more to one side, and then they moved the neck off to the opposite side. But you'll notice that the brackets on this, now this is the same size radiator. This is a high efficient 4-row radiator as this V8.
Do you want me to pull this up?
So yeah, let's pull this one up. And we're going to show you the side of the bracket. You see how it's offset to the opposite side on the side of the radiator.
Oh, this part right here.
Yeah. So that kind of helps you know that if it's for a V8 core support or a 6-cylinder core support. But both these radiators will do the same cooling. It's got the same core inside of them. If this were for a 55, 56 6-cylinder, the neck would be in the center, exactly like this one. It just would be, the brackets would be offset differently. So that's, I know some people struggle when talking about the radiators, fitting in the different positions, the brackets. You know, you can't take this radiator out of a V8 core support and it will not work in a 6-cylinder core support because the brackets are offset. You could see probably at least a good 1.5 inches between each other. So let's lay this back down. And then we're going to show you some brackets that Danchuk offers. Now we do have, this is one of our most popular brackets. It's just a flat plate with some holes drilled, slotted in it. You get all the hardware. This was designed to take this V8 radiator. Let's say you just bought a brand new V8 radiator and it was in the V8 core support, and you needed to add some more pulleys on the front of your engine, let's say you're adding power steering and air conditioning. Well, the pulleys are going to stick out so far that the fan's no longer going to clear the crankshaft pulley. And as soon as you try to space that fan forward, it's going to run into the radiator core. So to keep from having to buy a whole new radiator, you can buy these plates that will move this radiator out in front of your V8 core support. So now you're not buying a radiator or a core support, you're just going to be buying new longer hoses and a pair of these plates. So these plates are just going to go down each side right here, bolt onto the radiator, and then all the way through the core support to the back side where the radiator used to bolt to. The only downfall is on a 57, being that your neck is actually going to be off-centered, or the air baffle is going to be cut out off-centered. Taking this radiator in the center and trying to move it over to the front, the neck is in the middle and the baffle is not cut out for it. So we do have, in the catalog, we do have some baffles custom made that will have the cutout in the middle instead of off to the side like the original. Some people cut out the hole themselves out of their baffle. I've seen people, weld up the original hole and then cut out the new hole. But we have a baffle that's already done. You just got to switch them out. I don't know if any of you guys have any questions about this that I can answer right now.
Let us know, guys, if you have some questions.
Yeah, because this can get kind of complicated, because even though you're moving this radiator out front, this radiator's got to sit as low as possible with the water neck right above the core support bar.
And why is it that? Why does it have to sit low?
We have found sometimes in the 57s, noticing that when this was out front, the neck was a little bit sometimes further over, to make sure that the radiator cap clears the top side of the hood. If the water neck sticks up too high, you got a big fancy billet aluminum radiator cap, you may have some hood clearance issues. So you got to make sure this radiator is sitting as low as possible too. And that kind of goes for all 3 years. You got to check your hood clearance once this moves out there. But I think the 57 is a little bit more complicated, being that the way the hood's shaped and everything.
Okay, so Steve has a question. Steve says, I have a factory style radiator. I was told that it was cord for AC.
Oh, probably your
for AC.
Core, yeah, the actual core of the radiator. If it was cord for AC, I'm gonna guess it would have to be between a 3 and a 4 row radiator. Sometimes you can look into the top neck and see how many cores wide it is. So these are 4 core. So when I look into this neck, I can actually count 4 tubes from front to back. I would say original radiators, if I recall, were probably anywhere from 2 row on a 6-cylinder to 3 row on a V8.
So he's wondering then, I do not have AC, but he wants to know if this will help with the cooling.
Yeah, if it's, I would imagine, depending on the size of your motor, the horsepower, that all kind of takes some place with heat. So if you have something a little bit too performance, by itself without air conditioning, it probably wouldn't hurt to have a 4-row radiator. Now these are also high efficient radiators. So we weren't able to get a regular core out here to show the difference, but high efficient usually means that from left to right, you've got more tubes from left to right. They're put together a little closer, and you got more fins per square inch to cool these tubes off. Whereas a standard 4-row, still going to be 4 tubes thick, but crosswise there might be less tubes, and the fins are a little spreaded out a little bit more.
Okay, so Steve says he has a 265 with a mechanical fan, and it runs really cool.
Yeah, the 265 doesn't create a lot of heat. It's a low RPM engine, so it stays cool. You know, the only time you have to worry about it is if you add air conditioning to the car. Just think of putting another radiator in front of this radiator that's going to get hot when you turn the air conditioning on. Now it's taking that cold air, hitting the condenser first, turning it into warm air, and then the warm air is hitting your radiator. So you got to move more air across both of them to keep the engine cool. But yeah, the 265s are not too hard. Usually even an original stock radiator with the stock 4-blade fan can keep one of those motors cool. But some people will upgrade to like a 350 engine, leave the stock radiator, leave the stock fan, then you could have a few issues.
Yeah,
you know. Of course, changing the fan out would be your first choice, or putting a fan shroud is not an expensive thing to do. That should help move the air through the radiator. Your shroud is going to concentrate your air through the core and make sure it doesn't go just anywhere. The fan's going to concentrate the air. So, and we'll talk about this big Crossflow thing too. I'm just going to show one more thing. We got some brackets here Danchuk came up with a few years back. They're intended to mount an electric fan to the same 3 bolt holes on the side of the radiator, because you got a lot of cooling fans on the market that are kind of considered universal. So for instance, like this one here is just big enough to almost cover this core here, this way here. So you wouldn't normally put this right on the radiator core, but you would put it very close to it, because you don't want the vibration to mess up the core. So
I have a question. This may be a stupid question, but how come it doesn't fit completely over it? Does it matter that this is still open, because then it doesn't get the air right into it?
Yeah,
all this will kind of.
We do have one slightly bigger than this that would probably cover it even better. Just having this shroud around it makes a huge difference.
Oh, okay.
Even though it's not covering all the way to the corners, this will move enough air usually to do the job. Our other fan assembly, which is a little bigger, unfortunately is just a tad too big for this type of radiator. This one works best for the downflow radiators, whereas our next size bigger is going to be a little bit better for a crossflow. And that's because the water neck clearance. You can see here, this is just coming even with the bottom tube, and there's just enough room probably up here for the top tube and the top of the core support. The next size bigger is when you put it as high as you can against the core support up top, it interferes with the lower hose, and not too many people want to notch out the shroud. So, you know, they had made these plates. These plates are actually used for the little bit bigger shroud. Looking at this one actually mounts slightly different. The other one actually has nut certs on the side of the shroud, so this can be bolted up. These aren't pre-drilled yet, but once you get these in here, you can actually bolt this up to the side of the shroud a little faster. But both of these fans, the big one and the small one, comes with its own universal brackets. And usually you can make the universal brackets bolt up to the core support itself. Now, if you guys have any more questions before I get started on the Crossflow radiator.
We got some people watching from Argentina, and there's another one here. So thanks guys for watching.
All right.
All right.
So
tell us about this bad boy.
So this is probably the biggest and fanciest setup here. You don't have to go completely total this way. This is actually a complete kit. Comes out of the box this way. It's got an aluminum core support that looks like a factory steel core support but made of aluminum. It's got the Crossflow radiator, which if you were to probably add up the square inches of this core, it probably holds more water than a downflow. I mean, this thing is probably not a whole lot bigger, but it's definitely bigger in square inches. Out front of this one is the AC condenser that comes with this. This is a pre-made setup. Now we have other radiators in the catalog. We have Crossflow radiators by themselves with no fans, just the radiator itself. We have Crossflow radiators that come as a fan package. You get the dual fan package for the back of the radiator. And all these Crossflows, just to let you know, they all have to be out front of the core support. You have no choice. But the electric fans kind of fit inside within the core support area. So on most applications, it clears the pulley system on the engine.
I have a question. Do you need a fan shroud for this?
The fan shroud is built into the fans.
Oh, how
So
neat.
the fans on the back side, two 11-inch stall fans, they have shrouds built onto them. So there's no need to buy anything else. This one here is completely, I mean, it's got the overflow tank, and this is an extra tank here. I think it's more for looks, but it could be a functional tank too. Now this setup here is probably an average of $4,000 to $4,500 for this whole thing. Whereas you can get a radiator only with the two fans, you get the two relays, you get a thermal switch, you do get a generic overflow tank and a radiator cap, and then you're looking more in the $1,200 to $1,500 range for something like that. These things are rated with their dual fans. They're rated to go up to 700 horsepower of cooling. So you can run this, if you ran this on just a 350 engine, you can, with the air conditioning, it should be no problem with the fans that come with it. And they do sell these AC condensers separately that would bolt right on top too. So if you bought the radiator 1 year and the next year you decide to add air, you can always buy this particular condenser that will bolt right on top of it.
And how long does it usually take for you to install one of these radiators?
This one here could take a few hours because you're going to be having to pull out your old radiator, your old core support. If you do it carefully, you can do this without pulling the fenders. I've done it before, but it is a little tough, especially if you have a nice paint job. You want to mask off your paint because the fenders are going to be hanging there kind of on their own without any support by switching this out. You would, I'm in the middle of doing one now for somebody. I actually took the front fenders off the car because we're going to do some more stuff. We're going to, at the same time, we're going to pull the engine out, fix up the engine a little bit, put a new transmission, and maybe work on the firewall. So when we put it all back together, something like this is going to be going into it, a new core support and radiator system with air conditioning.
So will these be a little bit easier to install and quicker?
Yeah, of course these go right into the factory core supports, or like we said, with the brackets, so you wouldn't have to remove any core support to put one of these in. So if you got an old original Harrison radiator, they're kind of a little bit bulkier than these. It's hard to keep those things from getting a leak if the core hasn't been switched out in them. So if you're ready to switch out your Harrison to one of these, the only thing you have to usually worry about, because these are a little different design, is some of on the V8s here, you have a baffle on the bottom that you may have to do a little trimming on for one of these. This lower tank is not quite the same as an original Harrison. So in the past, the baffle was a little too thick up on the top of it, so I had to trim the lip off a little bit. I'm sure in the past some people just kind of bent the baffle a little bit away from it. But yeah, these are designed to be a bolt-in thing here, so these are a little bit easier. If you decide to do the fan shroud from Danchuk, involved with that, it's not so hard. It's just a couple brackets similar to these brackets that the shroud's going to bolt to.
Okay, let's answer this question.
Yeah.
On a bare brake system, do we have to use Heights or CPP, or is there another selection?
I believe Bel has always done it for the height spindles, when you're doing the 2-inch lowered spindles. But I know the companies are starting to make the kits also for CPP's modular spindles. I believe for sure Willwood's doing it already, so we would have to look and see if Bel is offering it yet for the CPP. But I know for sure if you want to do the 2-inch spindle, it's got to be a Heights for sure. But they also do kits for stock spindles too, of course.
Okay, great. All right, so you are basically done with anything else you want to talk about with these radiators?
No, I think we've covered about everything unless somebody else has a question about them.
We're only here for another few minutes, guys, so if you have a question, type it on in. We do have one question here. If I buy a Power Master Power Jan alternator with lamp terminals,
Yes.
what wiring kit do I need to get, and what original units do I disconnect?
Well, they have instructions that come with those to help you with getting the wiring situation taken care of between the old regulator that was on the inner fender. So they're going to have, I believe, depending on which one you buy, because we have two brands. There's the actual Power Gen that looks like just a regular generator with an internal regulated alternator, and then we also have one for power steering, which is from a different manufacturer. They both come with instructions. They both try to help you with it. I believe one of them comes with a small wiring harness, but if you would have to, I mean, we do have wire harnesses that were made for alternators, but you already have a wire in your factory harness, so they may just help you take out a couple wires that go to the regulator, and they'll let you know which ones to eliminate and which ones to keep. So you can have that light bulb in the dashboard still be there in case all of a sudden, the alternator stops charging, the light's supposed to come on. Without the instructions here, it'd be a little hard to tell you, but I'm sure that both companies offer instructions in their box to help you with going from your factory wiring harness now to an internal regulated alternator.
Okay, so let's see here. The next question is, with hardtop flippers, are they supposed to stay flipped up when window is down or the door is closed, or are they supposed to flip down at all times when the door closes?
Yeah, every time you shut your door, window rolled down or not, the flipper goes down. Your actual division bar, they call it, that's part of your vent window assembly, is what's shutting the flipper. So the little flipper lever is perfectly lined up with the division bar. So that means no matter if the window's up or down, that flipper is supposed to shut when you shut your door. The flippers have been a kind of an issue. The most simplest thing to remember is the flippers were manufactured almost perfectly straight. They don't have much of an arc to them, but if you look at your roof or put a straight edge to your roof line, you'll notice the roof has got an arc to it. It's got a bow. So if you take a flipper that's almost straight and bolt it up to your roof and tighten the screws down tight, now you're going to put your flipper in a bind, and it's not going to open and close. actually close the door on top of it.
He said it doesn't curve to the roof.
It doesn't perfectly curve to the roof. You'll actually, if you were to tighten up the front screw and the back screw, you'll see a gap in between the roof and the flipper. The flippers don't have the actual same arc as the roof. So you have to shim the flipper. Chevrolet did make a rubber that went in there that was thicker in the center and thinner on the sides. Unfortunately, nobody has made a mold to mold the flipper rubber exactly that way. So you're forced to use either washers or shimming material. Last one I did, I just used washers, and it is as simple as putting 2 washers on the 2 center screws, putting 1 washer on each screw on the outside of that, and in the very front and very rear screws, no washers at all, and that created a taper. You're just going to have to, because it's not all rubber, you may have to use some strip caulk or some kind of a foam type seal to fill in that gap once you've done that. We're only talking 2 washers, so it's not going to be a huge gap, but it will be a big enough gap water can go in, so you do got to seal it up. A few times that I've done that with the washers, it's made the flippers work perfect. But I see it all the time where people just put them in, crank down the screws real tight, and then the flipper stops working. If you loosen up all the screws, almost to where they're barely on the flipper, and just barely snug the front and the rear, the flipper will probably start working on you, and that just shows that you've bound up the flipper by tightening the center screws up too tight, and you put the actual flipper in a bind.
Okay, we only have like 1 more minute left, guys, so we're going to answer this last question. If my convertible top lift cylinder is low on fluid, what do I fill it up with?
That's a good question. It all depends on if your system is all original or if your system has replacement parts. Chevrolet always recommended .3 brake fluid back in the day, so you need to test your fluid, and you can't mix. If you've got .3 in there, you cannot put, let's say, power steering fluid or a hydraulic fluid in there. You can't mix the two. I believe today, if you were to replace everything, the pump, the cylinders, the hoses, the new stuff recommends Dextron 3 Mercom transmission fluid. I guess that's a really good fluid for the new systems. But unless you get your system completely flushed out, you wouldn't be able to mix the two. But originally, .3 brake fluid was what was used. And if you can avoid .3 brake fluid, that'd be best, because a leak of brake fluid in your car is going to eat up any paint on the floor pans. So it's not as friendly as the transmission fluid. But I know that for a fact that the new stuff, they recommend the transmission fluid instead.
All right. Great, thanks, Frank. That was really informative. Thank you so much for going over these radiators. And so you guys, we'll be here next week, next Friday at 1. I also want to let you know that we are having a Thanksgiving sale and a Cyber Monday sale. And so we'll let you know more about those sales. Just go on our website to find out, danchuk.com. And then also we are open on Saturdays from 8 to 1. So the showroom is open 8 to 1. Okay, so come on down and buy your parts here at Danchuk. And thank you all for watching. We had some great questions today, and we hope to see you next week. Okay, bye everybody.
All right, bye-bye.